All right, John McCarty here with Odyssey Test Prep. Today we are talking about the three biggest mistakes when studying for the Lsat. And these mistakes are related to what I call the three R's: readiness, reflection, and replication. So, JP, thanks for joining me today. Why don't we get started and talk about these mistakes that people have made? In fact, mistakes that we have made when we studied.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo that. Mistakes that I've personally made. So to talk on your first one, readiness, I think everyone's different, but usually how it goes is not tailoring the appropriate amount of time for the test. So,
Yeah.
You have on one end of the spectrum, you have people that, I was working with someone and they're like, I just started studying. I'm going to take it next month. Whoa. It's, we're not really we're not really in our best state of readiness, right? Whereas there's some other people where I'm going to take it 3 years from now. So it's modifying that variable, I think, is quite important.
But JP, it's February and application deadlines are in March. So I have to take it in 1 month.
Exactly. Yeah. There's some people, they get into the mindset where it's like, if I don't go this year, it's game over, but then you're not putting your best foot forward in terms of the whole application, right? Where the seats are taken. And so it's important to look at not just your readiness for the exam, but readiness in how the whole timeline works. So knowing the components of the timeline and when things are, I think is the first thing that you should do to see what the playing field is.
Yeah, for sure. And when do you want to be looking at this stuff? Is this sophomore year, junior year, senior year? Once you've graduated, when's the ideal time to start looking at this stuff?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would say what I've seen most commonly, if you're in uni, I've seen people look at it in junior or senior year. That being said, a lot of people will work on a summer, say if they have an internship, and then they'll pair it with LSAT, or maybe they'll just do LSAT for that summer. I would say, for example, for high school, SATs, American, college entrance exams, for a lot of times, if you start that too early, you don't have the prerequisite knowledge to take the test. Whereas for LSAT, it's, your reading comprehension. Logical reasoning is just a beast that you most likely will have to learn. So I would say starting to think about it maybe sophomore, junior year is good, because then you can also see is this for me? Let me talk to people, and you kind of get into the mindset of how is this going to look like, as opposed to senior year. Maybe you're there's a lot more moving parts.
Yeah. And if you want to go to law school right out of undergrad,
Exactly.
Starting in your senior year is going to make the timeline really tight and maybe make it too late.
Yeah.
Your ideal timeline is to have the LSAT done so you can apply early in the fall of your senior year so you can attend law school the very next year. Now, you can take the LSAT in November or even January, and people have had good outcomes still from that. But if you can, go for the ideal. Start looking at things sophomore year, junior year. If you can take it, at the latest, maybe August, September, October of your senior year, which means you're going to need to be prepared and be ready for that time frame. Those would be the ideal time frames in my mind. Anyways, if you want to go right after.
One thing that I'll also piggyback off that is I like how you're looking at a very broad picture overview. So that if you look at this in say junior year or sophomore year, you don't have to have the whole application ready, right? Where you're still building relationships with your professors, and you like this class, and you got the LSAT done your junior year, and you're starting to think, who should ask for recommendations? Because that takes time, right? Give them maybe well notice. yeah, and then you need to give budget time for like writing, and so it's all um I think maybe like junior year is the sweet spot, right? Because you've had
Yeah.
time to like have internships, explore classes, see if this is really for you, talk to
Right.
people, um and then see like, okay, do I want to go right out of uni, which in which case everything would be done, um my app would be done the fall of my senior of university, or do
Yep.
I want to be in the workforce for 1 year? So
Sure.
um, definitely knowledge is power. So inform
Yeah.
yourself on. Mhm.
And freshman year just feels too early, doesn't it?
You don't really know too many things. How many of
Right.
our friends are pre-med, or
Sure.
we just don't know enough yet. We haven't been exposed to enough, so it seems a little
Yeah.
premature.
And that's the beauty of the first 2 years of your 4 year degree is
Yeah.
it's a lot of exploration and finding
Yes.
what speaks to you, what your interests are, where you find like-minded people
Yeah.
and excitement. So don't feel like you have to rush it and think, sometimes we get calls from people who are in high school and we're like, just relax,
Yeah.
relax for a few
Yeah.
years, go experience some of college. You don't need to really worry about law school yet. Once you get into the end of that sophomore year, though, you're starting to develop things. By junior year, you've got a pretty good sense of what path you want to take and where
Yeah.
your interests lie. So that's a good time to really nail it, and if that's the direction you're going.
And definitely, I think sometimes even, it's funny. I remember, so I went to Northwestern. And I remember when we were all freshmen going in, about to start school, they were saying like, "All right, guys, slow down, slow down." I know so many of you guys are picking out your med schools or your law schools, but um, if anything, giving it a little bit more time, freshman year, sophomore year, kind of helps you make a more informed decision, right? And
Yeah.
strengthens like, oh, this is actually what I really like, and from there, um, start informing yourself, see what works best with what you want, etc. So
Yeah, and over
junior
those
year.
2 years, your reading comprehension skills and your logic skills will probably improve pretty
Yeah,
dramatically
I
during
agree.
those first 2 years too.
Yeah.
So, uh, there is no pre, you're not like stacking knowledge like you would on the SATs or the MCAT,
Yeah.
for instance, but you are demonstrating skills, and those skills
Yeah.
will get stronger over a 2, 3, 4 year period,
Yeah.
as you progress through your coursework.
Yeah.
So, how long would you say to allot for the LSAT to make sure that you're ready?
That's a good question. It's kind of hard to find a one size fits all, but I would definitely say like a couple of months, because, and the example I gave earlier, some people are like, hey, okay, I know I have to do this. I'll take it next month. It's like, whoa, have we taken some practice tests? Do we know the format? Um, like, are we putting our best foot forward, right? Because this is like the great equalizer.
Yeah.
There's so many people coming with different jobs, different majors, and how do we quantify them? So this is something. I mean, this is a very big part of your application that helps you stand out and um, have something to compare against with others. So
Yep.
definitely deserves some months, and it's not always going to be a smooth ride where weddings, exams, family things happening. So you do um, 3, 6 months. Like I think is good, is reasonable.
Yeah, and that's kind of like a paradigm shift for most people. Imagine saying like, okay, a final's coming up. 1 month is not enough time to study for that final. That
Yeah,
would seem absurd, right?
yeah,
To most people. And for the LSAT, 1 month really is not enough time. I would argue 2 months is probably not enough time either.
I think so too.
It's once you get to 3 months. And again, like you said, life can happen in there. So you may
Yeah,
have, if you allocate 3 months, you're on kind of the tighter end of it. If one
yeah,
month gets eaten up by a family emergency and you got to head home and, you know, God forbid something happens that you need to take care of things in that regard, those things do happen.
yeah,
So if you're ahead of the game and you say, okay, I'm going to start looking at this early in my junior year, get this done by the end of my junior year. If everything goes according to plan, great. If things don't, you've got an extra 6 months that you could still be
yeah,
studying and take it in the fall of your senior year. No problem, and still
yeah.
apply early and everything's good.
And it's the security, right? To give yourself extra time, right? Where like your ideal condition is 3 months, but then you have a buffer, right? So I think informing yourself on the cycle and giving yourself more time, because this is a big thing, is to your advantage. And I've heard a lot of people say, summer, hunker down, but it's tough. Maybe there's internships and there's a lot of moving things. So some people can really hunker down, but for others, you have to be realistic with your schedule. You're not sure, where you're coming in at. Some people just right away are very comfortable with it. Others, it's you have to like try different you have to see what resources are out there,
Yeah.
and you have to experiment a little. One thing that we've talked about before is we've used a couple of resources and they didn't work for us, right? But that took up a lot of our time.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, I need just to go from point A to point B. There's going to be a little bit of
Sure.
waddling in there as we find out what works best to study.
Yeah. And remember, you are fundamentally in competition with the other people taking the test. Do you want to spend 1 month and they spend 6 months? Like, do you think you can really compete? And these are the best and brightest. These people want to go to Harvard. These people want to go
Yeah.
to Yale, Stanford. They want to go to T14 schools.
Yeah.
And they're going to spend 6 months and you're going to spend one. I don't know if you can compete with that kind of deficit.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. Other people are going to be doing more. Be one of those people, because there's going to be a lot of
Yeah.
people who do less and you're competing with them too. So like if you
Yeah.
put in 6 and they put in 1, you're almost certainly going to be better than them.
Yeah. And
And if you listen to
yeah.
the stories of like any of the great athletes, it's usually not, oh, they're a freak of nature, which, like maybe they are genetically, like they've got the juice, right? But it's also like the story is almost always they came in way earlier than anybody else. They stayed later than anybody else. They put it on, they put it in practice. They did more than anybody else did. And then that compounded over years ended up just separating them by miles from
Yeah.
other people in the league.
Yeah. And it's those little things that put you at a great advantage, right? Even if you don't use the 6 months or 7 months, you have extra time, you're ready, you're in the driver's seat, right? Rather
Yeah.
than you scrambling and oh, what do I do? Now I need to switch things up. Um, yeah, so I do like that sports analogy, right? You want to go in there and turn the lights on to the gym, right?
That's right.
Be the last to leave.
That's right. Turn them on and turn them off.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So the second are reflection. So let's talk a little bit about the mistakes that people make within that process.
Yeah. So first things first, like we talked about, know the admission cycle and allocate enough time to study for this. But once you're past that stage and you're thick in the mud, right, in the studying, far too often, and we've done this ourselves too, there's a mindset of more is better, right? So I'm gonna crank out practice tests or sections
Yep.
left and right, blah 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 blah, and have we really reviewed them? The section, the drill, the practice test that we take is an opportunity to apply what we've learned. And if we're not taking time to reflect and trying to do things differently and apply new things, then we're going to keep making the same mistakes, right? There's no difference. Why? There has to be a purpose in taking these new things. And that purpose is found in the reflection, in the studying process, in the review.
Yeah, for sure. And back to the sports analogy, there's also watching game day tape and
Yeah.
preparing, like looking at the things that went right, the things that went wrong, where the improvements need to be, how the certain matchups ended up unfolding, and those types of things. So, that reflection part is really important as well. So, yes, you do want to outwork other people, but you need to work smart too.
Yes.
And rest is part of recovery, which is part of
Yes.
work. And all of these things need to come together, and reflection is a huge part of it. Because if you have poor form and you just keep practicing with poor form, you're never going to really get to the level that you could if you were to really look at it, adjust your form, and just get things really dialed in before you start to really max things out and really push things really hard.
Yeah. John, I love two things that you said there in particular. One being, in reflection, oftentimes people think it's just within the LSAT world, but it's also outside. You know, a lot of people I work with, I tell them, you want to control things outside of your LSAT bubble because that optimizes your performance inside, right? So are we sleeping enough? You know, are we going out drinking every weekend, like, and waking up hungover, eats our weekends, you know,
Yeah.
like how are, you know, are, you know, I have some people, you know, they're sitting down and they're studying 10 hours, but it's like out of those 10 hours, like, what was it, like 2 good hours that came out of that? You know, it's,
Yeah.
just a reflection of what we're doing outside, I think is very important. And the
Yep.
second thing that I like that you said is, you know, if your golf swing is broken, if your shooting form basketball is broken, we're just going to keep digging deeper with those bad habits, right? And
Yeah.
so if we don't know how to, uh, like, if we don't know the difference between necessary and sufficient assumptions, and we just keep applying these bad habits, it's going to be a little bit tougher to untangle these like ingrained bad habits. So that's
Yeah.
why we reflect.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes the water so murky too when you,
Yeah,
especially with sufficient and necessary. If you don't have those firm from the beginning, you things start to like really get
wobble.
out of focus and wobbly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So reflection, super important. You'll never make the adjustments that you need to make if you're not reflecting. So that's the point of reflection, is to make adjustments. And as you make those adjustments, you'll find that you incrementally get better. And sometimes you'll get big pops of getting
yes.
better as well.
And one thing I also want to say is in that reflection, you know, you hear a lot of people say, okay, great. You want me to review, you want me to reflect. What does that mean? How do I do that? Right? What differentiates good reflection from bad reflection? And I
Sure.
would say it's something that is actionable, right? So let's say someone got something wrong at RC, right? And then they think, why did I get that wrong? What should I do next time? And if they have a wrong answer journal, they could say something like, I'll just read better. But what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
That's not something we can act upon. Of course we want
Yeah.
to read better.
Yeah.
But if we instead said something like, if we analyze our decision making process, right, and say like, oh, this component of the wrong answer choice, I actually didn't understand what this meant. So next time I want to make sure that each part of the answer choice, I, um, you know, I can like put a check there and see like, did it do this? Check. Did it do that? Check. You know, that's something actionable. Or, um, I didn't really understand the main conclusion or like the purpose, the main idea of this reading, um, this section. So what I want to do is like after every paragraph, I'm just gonna have a little main idea and see what part is the overarching, you know, theme. So,
Yeah.
um, these like more concrete things, and it takes time, right? And it's hard, and we're not always
Yeah.
going to get it right away, but it's um, that more intentional review, I think, is the most helpful.
Yeah. And I love that. Something actionable.
Yeah.
Like, hold on to that. Take that with you if you're watching this. That's the most important thing. Like, if you're missing accepts, it's actionable. Highlight the word accept. If
Exactly.
you're, like, you can't just walk away and be like, I'll read it better. I won't miss it next time.
And what does
Well,
that
you
mean?
missed it this
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
all missed it, right? It
Yeah.
happens to all of us until we figure out what exactly our process is. And if you start highlighting it and you never miss it again, great, you've got a winner.
Yeah.
If you're highlighting it and you still miss it, okay, we got to go back and, we got to come up with something different. We got to
Yeah.
change, but again, something actionable.
Yeah. Well, one thing that came to mind is like I do have a lot of students that like to take like paper tests, and it's like, oh, that's, you know, that's great. I do want you to transition to like computer so you can like replicate test taking conditions, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you know, maybe like tapping each word if you find you like you miss words sometimes, or had a lot of people ask me about like parallel reasoning, parallel flaws, and it's like, all right, we can like write down like the skeletal structure, right, and be like A to B, and you know, make our own example. So
Yeah.
um it's not always going to be a surefire fit, but this like intentional way of thinking will help you reach your goals faster.
Yeah. And you'll start experimenting with things. And that's a part of this practicing process, is the experimentation of
Yes.
what can I do that's going to work, that for me specifically.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but yeah, let's get to that replication, because I think that's super important as well. This is the third thing that people make big mistakes on, is they don't replicate real testing conditions when they take their practice tests.
Yeah, that's a big one.
So talk to me about it.
So, I haven't seen this just in LSAT, but I see this in so many different places, right? Where, um, say like, oh, I just finished work, or it's midnight, and I just take a section or practice test, and oh, lo and behold, like so many things are wrong. I wasn't feeling very well when I took it. If you're in a championship game, are you just gonna like eat cheeseburgers before the game? Or are you gonna like, is the game gonna be held at midnight? Right? You take it serious, right? You want, one of the best things someone ever told me was, you want the real test just feel like another practice test.
Yes.
I've been there, I've done that. I'm familiar with the program. I know what I'm gonna eat before. I've been here before. I'm comfortable. Versus like people taking it after work or at midnight, or they like take pauses, and they're not doing it like through time conditions. It's we wanted to feel like just another practice test when we're really in it.
And if you think about it, like back to the sports analogy, which I'm going to beat to death today, apparently. But if you've got two teams in the Super Bowl, right? One team has won 2 championships before. The other team's a young team, but they got a ton of talent, and it's time for the big game. People are going to bet on the team that's been there before, the team that's won those, who's been on that big stage, who has done it, even if they're slightly less talented than the other team, because it's going to feel like just like another regular game. They're not going to have, the anxiety is not going to bubble over into mistakes. It's going to be, it's just going to fire them up into like highest performance. Because like anxiety can be a good thing. Like if you get like to here, you're like, okay, I am juiced and ready to go. If you get to here, you're like, I'm feeling a little wild and crazy. If you get to here, you're like, I can't do it. Like you can't perform anymore.
Yeah.
And it feels a little, I don't, it feels a little goofy, I think, for most people. It did for me to be like, okay, I have my number 2. This is when it was paper and pencils. I got my number 2 pencils. I sharpen them this way. I'm going to sit down at this desk. I'm going to have this bottle of water here. I'm going to have my clear plastic bag full of snacks, and I'm going to sit down and do this. It feels silly in some way, but on test day, I felt so comfortable. Everything was totally perfect. Everything went off without a hitch, and that's what you want to feel like on test day. So go through like a little bit of the silliness and goofiness of doing it that way previously, during your practice test. So test day just feels super normal.
Yeah, John, I love what you said about sports, because you see it all the time, right? If anyone likes sports, it's the older teams, the veterans, they've been on this big stage before. It's the lights aren't too bright. They have like the heart of a champion. And then that means so much, right? So like you said, in this analogy, I've been here before. I've looked at these, like I've gotten the jitters, like, I tell so many students, I tell them like, take some sections back to back. And then let's say you're like a little rattled from one section, you're cool, calm, collected for the next one, right? That's happened in your practice. It's like, it might happen on the LSAT. Like there's a big chance. But it's like, I've been here before. I learned how to collect myself. I'm not rattled. On the silliness note, it's like every time I run a big race, I have my oatmeal, my Greek yogurt, my banana, and it puts me in the driver's seat, and it really does make a big difference, right? Or it's making the environment more familiar, right? And that familiarity leads to confidence, right? Because you're in control. So please replicate test taking conditions. The time of day you take it, how you feel. Are you taking a walk before? What are you eating? That is just such a big asset. I don't think people take into account.
Yeah, because as humans, like we can deal with like a little bit of randomness is fine for us, and like a little more randomness, we're like, okay, I'm not sure about this. Once the randomness hits a certain level, then all of a sudden our focus is in a bunch of different directions. Like what's going on over there, what's going on here, and on test day, everything's not going to go perfectly like it did on your practice test either. So if you're only controlling for 50% of the things that you can control, and half of those things end up being strange, like the proctor does something, or the connection drops, you have to wait for 20 extra minutes, and these various different things that can happen on test day. If that's the only thing that happens that's kind of strange, you can roll with that easy. But if it's that plus this plus the other, and all these little things all of a sudden pile up to just be like, I'm not ready for this. This is too much. There's too many variables that feel totally out of control.
Yeah. And it's just such a small thing you can do that really leads to, I think, like I would say like asymmetric outcomes, where it's like,
Yeah.
I just control for these little things. I took it during the same time of day. I know how it feels like to use this software, right? Or am I glasses or a contacts person? One story I think I might have shared before is, I had a friend taking his MCAT, and he always studied in glasses, but during test day he used his contacts, and then his eyes got dry, like one almost fell out. It was just a nightmare, right? But
yeah,
why introduce new variables, right? You want this to feel
Crazy.
just like practice. You want it to feel like you've been there before, right? So
yeah. Never introduce new variables on your own. New variables will be introduced by factors beyond your control. That's okay. But don't do it to yourself. Don't drink 3 cups of coffee if you're not a coffee drinker the day before the test, the day of the test, right?
Yeah.
Don't cram all night and do some sort of like weird all-nighter and then just roll in, like crazy-eyed and to the exam. Just, do everything that you can to make it like your practice tests, and take as many of those practice tests as you can, replicating real test taking conditions, because that'll give you, as JP said, the heart of a champion. So when you go in there on test day, you'll be ready to crush.
And one thing I also want to say is, for test taking centers, like you can, if you also have the option to take a remote, but for test taking centers, you can feel the difference, right? It's, some people, they're melting down, oh, this happened, oh my gosh, and then other people are like, I'm ready to go. I've been here before. So you want to be that ready to go, I've been here before person, right? Because you can control that.
Yeah. And I've seen people crying in the hallways.
Oh, for
I've seen people throw up from nerves.
Yes.
There's so many. There's been stories of even wilder stuff happening, from students who have gone and taken the test with other people who are near them, and they stayed locked in, and they're like, all right, this happened, but I locked it in and I kept going. So it's the real deal. Like, people are going to break down potentially in your vicinity. You need to be as strong as you possibly can. Stay focused. Maybe if it's in the hallway, you can give a word of encouragement, but stay on your track. It's your day, and get after it.
Yeah. And one last thing I'll say is, I love how John, gave you the acronym to just, hey, what are things that others have done that I can learn from, right? And let me keep coming back to these 3 variables and just checking in on myself. Like, am I doing a good job? So I think that's great.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, don't neglect the 3 R's: readiness, reflection, and replication. If you get those right, you're doing a great job.
Yes.
Thanks for joining me, JP. It's always great chatting with you, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah. Good luck, everyone.